The stars belong to the strong. This was the first law of the Galactic Concord, written in crystal and blood across 3 million years of conquest. At the very top of this cosmic ladder sat the ethereals, beings of pure thought housed in crystalline bodies that sparkled like captured starlight. They moved without flesh, spoke without sound, and ruled without mercy. Commander Sarah Chen had never seen anything like them. As she stood in the detention chamber of her captured ship, the UES Horizon, she watched the lead ethereal float closer. Its crystal form pulsed with cold blue light, and when it spoke, the words appeared directly in her mind. "Fascinating," the creature said, its mental voice like ice scraping against glass. "Another flesh race, Class 7 by preliminary assessment. Note the primitive skeletal structure, the inefficient respiratory system, the crude sensory organs." Sarah tried to speak, but the energy field holding her in place also silenced her voice. Around her, her crew of 37 humans stood frozen in similar fields. They had come in peace, carrying messages of friendship from Earth. Now they were specimens in an alien laboratory. The ethereal's assistant was a creature from the scaled dominion. It looked like a cross between a lizard and a machine, with gleaming metal plates grafted into its skin. The thing took notes on a device that projected words into the air. Biped locomotion, standard mammalian traits, forward-facing eyes indicating predator evolution, the scaled creature hissed. Curious retention of emotional bonding behaviors. Note the stress responses when isolated from pack members. Pack members. Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity. These aliens saw her crew as animals running in a herd. Most disturbing, the ethereal continued, are the companion species records we found on their vessel. They voluntarily cohabitate with lower life forms, dogs, cats, various creatures they call pets. This suggests severe mental deficiency or evolutionary regression. The scaled assistant nodded eagerly. Clearly a species that failed to properly evolve beyond beast consciousness, illuminated one. They retain primitive pack-bonding instincts. Most inefficient. Sarah remembered her daughter's golden retriever, Max, waiting for her back on Earth. The thought of these creatures calling him a lower life form made her blood boil, but she could only stand there, trapped and helpless. Their home planet shows similar inefficiency. Another voice added, "This one belonged to a member of the Hive Collective, an insect-like being with too many eyes and limbs that moved in perfect synchronization with its companions. Vast resources wasted on preservation of wild animals and natural habitats. No proper resource extraction. No unified purpose." The ethereal's crystal body brightened with what might have been amusement. A world of inefficient flesh maintaining other inefficient flesh. How delightfully primitive. Catalog this species for immediate processing. Their world will provide adequate minerals once properly strip-mined. Strip-mined. Sarah's heart sank. They weren't just talking about enslaving humanity. They planned to destroy Earth entirely. "What classification shall we assign, illuminated one?" the scaled creature asked. "Standard Class 7 designation. Forced labor capacity only. Begin immediate genetic modification protocols to reduce aggressive tendencies and increase compliance. Separate family units to prevent pack behavior reinforcement. Eliminate the companion species immediately to remove emotional crutches." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Genetic modification. Separated families. And they wanted to kill every dog, cat, and beloved pet on Earth. "Sir," one of her crew members, Lieutenant Torres, managed to whisper through the energy field. "My kids, silence the specimens," the ethereal commanded. The scaled assistant touched a control, and Torres's voice cut off entirely. But Sarah could see the panic in his eyes, the same panic she felt building in her chest. "Broadcasting conquest parameters to the fleet now," the Hive representative announced. "Estimated pacification time, 6 standard months. Estimated specimen processing, 2 billion units. Estimated mineral extraction timeline, 50 standard years, 2 billion units." They were talking about 2 billion human lives as if they were counting rocks. The ethereal turned its attention back to Sarah. "You are the pack leader of this group, yes? Your biosigns indicate elevated stress when other specimens are threatened. Fascinating. We shall keep you alive longer for behavioral study. You will watch your species learn their proper place in the natural order." Sarah tried to speak, to scream, to do something, but the energy field held her as effectively as solid stone. "The natural order," the ethereal continued. "Places thought above flesh. Efficiency above emotion. Order above chaos. Your species represents everything the galaxy has evolved beyond. You cling to your animal instincts, your illogical bonds, your wasteful diversity. We shall cure you of these deficiencies. The scaled assistant looked up from its notes. Illuminated 1. Preliminary scans suggest unusual neurological complexity for a Class 7 species. Should we investigate further? Irrelevant, the ethereal dismissed. Complexity without proper direction is merely chaos. Their brains may be intricate, but they use them for primitive purposes. Pack bonding, emotional reasoning, attachment to inferior species. No different from any other flesh race, merely louder in their inefficiency. Hours passed in that chamber. Sarah watched her crew, saw the fear and anger in their eyes. She thought about Earth, about her daughter, about Max the golden retriever. She thought about every zoo, every national park, every family pet that these creatures planned to exterminate in the name of efficiency. The ethereal was right about one thing. Humans were different from other species in the galaxy, but not in the way it thought. When the transport ship arrived to take them to the processing center, Sarah caught a glimpse through the viewport of the conquered fleet moving toward Earth. Hundreds of crystal ships, their forms beautiful and terrible, carrying death to everything she loved. Your world will thank us eventually, the ethereal told her as they were moved to holding cells. Once we remove the chaos of your primitive nature, once we eliminate the inefficiencies of your emotional bonds, your species will find peace in servitude. It is the natural way. Natural. Sarah almost laughed. These beings had clearly never met a human who had lost everything they cared about. They spoke of eliminating emotional bonds as if emotions were a weakness. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. As the transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them away from Earth and toward an unknown fate, Sarah made herself a promise. If she lived through whatever these monsters had planned, she would show them the true nature of the human beast. She would show them what happened when you threatened a human's pack. The ethereal thought humanity's bonds made them weak. Sarah knew better. Those bonds were about to become the greatest weapon the galaxy had ever seen. The stars belong to the strong, the ethereal had said. Soon they would learn what real strength looked like. Earth lasted 6 months. The Concorde fleet arrived with overwhelming force, their crystal ships floating in orbit like deadly jewels. They sent no demands, no ultimatums. The message was simple: surrender or die. President Martinez stood in the emergency bunker beneath Washington, watching the feeds from around the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. Every major city had conquered ships hovering overhead like dark promises. "Sir," General Harrison said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "our nuclear arsenal won't even scratch their shields. Every fighter jet we've sent up has been disabled before firing a shot. They're not even trying to hurt our pilots. They're just shutting down our engines and letting the planes glide to the ground." Martinez nodded grimly. The aliens weren't even considering humanity a real threat. They were being gentle, the way someone might be gentle with a misbehaving pet. The first bombardment began at dawn, Greenwich Mean Time. But it wasn't the devastating attack everyone expected. Instead, precise energy beams struck military installations, power plants, and communication centers. Within hours, Earth's defensive capabilities were gone. No one was killed yet, then came the voice. It spoke in every language simultaneously, broadcast on every remaining device on the planet. "People of Earth." The voice was cold, emotionless, clearly artificial. "You are now under the protection of the Galactic Concord. Resistance is unnecessary and will be corrected. Report to designated collection points for processing and assignment. Compliance will ensure your survival and eventual happiness in your new roles." Marcus Rodriguez clutched his daughter Sophia closer as they huddled in their basement in Colorado. She was 12 years old and hadn't stopped crying since their cat Whiskers had run away during the first bombardment 3 days ago. "Dad, when will Whiskers come home?" Sophia asked for the 100th time. Marcus didn't have the heart to tell her that Whiskers was probably dead in the woods, terrified and alone. "Soon, mija, soon." The collection ships landed within a week. They looked like giant metal teardrops, setting down in empty fields and parking lots around the world. Concord troops emerged, mostly members of the Scaled Dominion and Hive Collective. The ethereals remained safely in orbit. Marcus watched from his hiding place as his neighbors walked toward the ships. They moved like sleepwalkers, their eyes empty. Some kind of neural control, he realized. The aliens weren't just collecting humans, they were already starting to reprogram them. This is a temporary inconvenience, the broadcast voice continued. Your species will be improved. Inefficient emotional responses will be reduced. Primitive pack bonding behaviors will be eliminated. You will find peace in your new purpose. That was when they started killing the animals. Marcus watched in horror as conquered troops systematically went through the neighborhood, using handheld devices to locate and eliminate every dog, cat, bird, and hamster they could find. They did it efficiently without emotion, the way someone might spray for insects. Mrs. Patterson from next door ran out screaming when they vaporized her cocker spaniel. Buddy. The scaled troops simply stunned her unconscious and loaded her onto their transport. One of them made what might have been a laugh. Emotional attachment to inferior species, the creature hissed to its companion. Fascinating that they mourn for genetic dead ends. Sophia saw Whiskers dart across the yard, heading for the woods. She started to run after him, but Marcus held her back. 2 seconds later, a conquered soldier spotted the cat and fired. Whiskers simply disappeared. Sophia's scream could probably be heard 3 blocks away. That night, they came for the humans. The processing was methodical. Families were separated immediately. Pack Structure Disruption Protocol, the scaled troops called it. Parents were sent to one facility, children to another. Husbands and wives were divided. Even friendships were broken up after the aliens scanned their neural patterns and identified excessive emotional bonding. Marcus found himself in a labor camp in what used to be Nevada, along with 2,000 other men. The work was simple, mining rare earth minerals for conquered technology. The conditions weren't even particularly harsh. The aliens provided adequate food, medical care, and shelter. But they had miscalculated one crucial thing. They think we're broken, whispered Dr. James Okafor, a former NASA engineer who worked the mine shift next to Marcus. They separated us from our families, killed our pets, destroyed our homes. They think we'll just give up. Marcus nodded, his hands still shaking from the neural inhibitor treatments they'd subjected him to that morning. The aliens were trying to chemically reduce his aggressive responses and pack bonding behaviors. But the treatments weren't working the way they expected. My daughter, Marcus said quietly. They have my daughter somewhere, and they killed her cat just to watch her cry. Dr. Okafor's eyes hardened. My wife, my 2 boys. They took them all. Around them, other conversations were happening. Quiet, careful, but growing stronger every day. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human psychology. They thought breaking up families and eliminating emotional attachments would make humans compliant. Instead, it was making them angry. The neural treatments aren't working on everyone, Dr. Okafor continued. Some of us seem to have natural resistance. And the others? The treatments are wearing off faster than the aliens expected. Marcus had noticed it too. Men were starting to remember, starting to plan, starting to rage. The conquered guards were few and complacent. Why wouldn't they be? Every other species in the galaxy had accepted processing peacefully once their family structures were disrupted. The aliens had done this thousands of times before, but they had never done it to humans. They want to study our primitive behaviors, Dr. Okafor said. They're keeping detailed records of our responses, our attempts at resistance, our emotional patterns. They think we're just interesting animals to be observed. Good, Marcus growled. Let them watch. Let them learn. That night, Marcus lay on his cot and thought about Sophia's face when Whiskers disappeared. He thought about every pet, every animal, every innocent creature these monsters had exterminated. He thought about families torn apart, children taken from their parents, and the cold efficiency with which the Concord treated human suffering. The aliens were right about one thing. Humans were beasts, but they had completely misunderstood what kind of beasts they were. The next morning brought news from the guards that made Marcus smile for the first time in months. 3 Concord facilities had gone dark during the night. Communication lost, guards missing, prisoners escaped. The aliens were calling it equipment malfunction and statistical anomaly. Marcus knew better. Somewhere out there, humans were starting to fight back. The beasts of Earth were waking up, and when they did, the galaxy would learn what 3 million years of evolution on a death world had really created. The Concord had wanted to study primitive human behaviors. They were about to get a masterclass in the most primitive behavior of all, What happened when you hurt a human's family? The aliens thought they were breaking humanity's spirit. Instead, they had just made the most dangerous mistake in galactic history. They had made humanity angry. Dr. Elena Vasquez had always been curious about alien biology. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had dreamed of first contact for years. She had imagined peaceful exchanges of knowledge, cultural understanding, scientific cooperation. She had never imagined being chained to a laboratory table while aliens prodded her brain with neural probes. Subject exhibits unusual resistance to standard pacification protocols, the scaled researcher noted, its voice a mechanical hiss. Emotional suppression treatments are failing after only 72 hours instead of the expected permanent effect. Elena kept her eyes closed and tried to breathe steadily. For 3 months, she had been the unwilling subject of conquered behavioral experiments. They were trying to understand why humans were so difficult to process compared to other species. Perhaps increased dosage, suggested the Hive Collective researcher. Its compound eyes studied Elena like she was a particularly interesting insect. No, the scaled creature replied. We have already exceeded safe parameters twice. Any further increase risks specimen death, and the ethereals want this one kept alive for long-term study. Elena had learned to stay very still during these discussions. The aliens talked about her as if she wasn't there, revealing crucial information they never meant her to hear. The neural scans continue to show anomalous patterns. The Hive researcher buzzed. This species' brain structure is unlike anything in our databases. Excessive connectivity between regions, redundant pathways, abnormal stress response systems. Primitive evolution, the scaled researcher dismissed. Their planet clearly failed to provide proper selective pressure for mental efficiency. Elena almost laughed. If only they knew. That night, alone in her cell, Elena put together the pieces she had been gathering for months. The conquered scientists, in their arrogance, had given her access to their biological databases while studying her reactions to alien species information. They wanted to see how her primitive brain processed complex data. They had no idea she was memorizing everything. The picture that emerged was staggering. Every species in the galactic conquered had evolved on worlds with specific, consistent environmental pressures. The ethereals came from a planet with perfect climate stability. No weather, no disasters, no variables. The scaled dominion had evolved on high-gravity worlds with predictable dangers. The Hive Collective developed on planets with abundant resources and few challenges. Earth was different. Earth was chaos. Elena closed her eyes and thought about her home planet. Ice ages that lasted millions of years, followed by warming periods that melted continents. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Asteroids that wiped out entire species. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, plagues, droughts, floods. Earth had thrown everything at humanity's ancestors, and they had survived it all. No wonder human brains were anomalous. They had been forged in chaos, shaped by countless disasters, refined by millions of years of unpredictable challenges. Humans hadn't specialized because they couldn't afford to. They had to be ready for anything. Generalists, Elena whispered to herself. We're generalists in a galaxy of specialists. The implications were enormous. While other species had evolved to be perfectly adapted to their specific environments, humans had evolved to adapt to any environment. Other species thought in predictable patterns because their worlds had been predictable. Humans thought in chaotic, creative, unpredictable ways because chaos was their natural state. But there was more. Elena had also been studying the conquered's pacification techniques, the methods they used to break the will of conquered species. The process was elegant and efficient. Disrupt family structures, suppress emotional responses, eliminate cultural connections. Worked perfectly on species that had evolved stable social structures on stable worlds. It was useless against humans. Elena had watched the aliens try to suppress human pack-bonding behaviors and emotional responses. But human emotions weren't simple chemical reactions like in other species. Human emotions were survival tools, hardened by millions of years of Earth's challenges. The love between human parents and children wasn't just biological programming. It was a survival mechanism that had helped humans endure ice ages and migrations across hostile continents. Human friendships weren't just social connections. They were alliance networks that had allowed small groups to survive against impossible odds. When the Conquered tried to break these bonds, they weren't just fighting human psychology. They were fighting millions of years of evolution on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Elena began to laugh, quietly at first, then louder. The irony was beautiful. The aliens thought Earth was a failed world because it was so chaotic and dangerous. They couldn't understand why humans had never achieved the perfect order of other civilizations. They didn't realize that chaos was humanity's greatest gift. The next day, Elena pretended to be more affected by the neural treatments than she actually was. She let the aliens think their pacification was finally working, and when they relaxed their guard, she began to act. The Concord Research Facility had excellent security against escape attempts. It had no security at all against someone who wanted to access their computer systems. Elena's background in biology had required extensive computer training, and Earth's chaotic education system meant she had learned programming, hacking, system analysis, and data manipulation alongside her primary field. The aliens, with their specialized thinking, couldn't conceive of a biologist who was also a computer expert. It took her 2 weeks to break into their communication system. Her message was simple, broadcasted on all frequencies to every human resistance cell the system could reach. You are not broken. You are not primitive. You are evolution's masterpiece. Earth made you to survive anything. Now survive this. She attached everything she had learned about Conquered biology, technology, and psychology. But most importantly, she attached her analysis of human evolution and why the aliens' techniques were failing. Humans weren't defective. They were perfect, perfect for chaos, perfect for adaptation, perfect for surviving anything the universe could throw at them. The response was immediate. Within days, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human resistance cells that had been struggling were suddenly succeeding. Escape attempts that had been failing were working. Humans who had seemed broken were fighting back with renewed strength. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her cell and smiled. The aliens had made the classic mistake of every bully in history. They had underestimated their victim. They thought they were studying primitive beasts. Instead, they had handed the most dangerous predator in the galaxy a complete guide to their weaknesses. Earth's children were about to show the Conquered what 3 billion years of evolution in hell had really created. The hunt was about to begin. The first sign of trouble came from orbital station Kepler-7, a remote mining platform in the Outer Rim territories. Captain Zara Kaith of the Scaled Dominion was reviewing weekly reports when the station simply stopped responding. Communications failure? Asked her second-in-command, Lieutenant Dexmar. Impossible, Zara Kaith replied. Kepler-7 has redundant systems. Even catastrophic damage should allow emergency broadcasts. 3 days later, a Hive collective patrol ship found Kepler-7, or what was left of it. The station's hull was intact, life support functional, all systems operational, but every single alien crew member was dead. Not killed by weapons or explosions, simply dead. Their bodies showing signs of precise surgical strikes to vital organs. The human slaves were gone. Security footage, Zarek demanded as she stood in the station's control room a week later. The recordings told an impossible story. The 43 human laborers had somehow escaped their holding cells simultaneously. Moving in perfect coordination, they had systematically hunted down each guard, each technician, each officer, but they hadn't acted like escaped prisoners running in panic. They had acted like a military unit. Watch this section. Lieutenant Dexmar pointed to a corridor view. The humans move in formation. 3 scouts, main group in the center, rear guard. And see how they communicate? Hand signals, not vocal commands. They're maintaining noise discipline. Zara Kaith watched in growing unease as the humans flowed through the station like water, adapting to each obstacle, coordinating without apparent leadership. When they encountered sealed doors, some humans worked on the locks while others established security perimeters. When they found weapons, they distributed them based on apparent skill levels. They learned our technology in weeks, she whispered. Systems that take our species years to master. But the most disturbing part came at the end. The humans didn't just escape. They stole 3 Concorde ships, downloading navigational data and technical specifications before departing. The security footage showed them studying the controls, figuring out alien technology through trial and error with frightening speed. Send word to all stations, Zara Kaith ordered. Increase security around human prisoners immediately. The message came too late. Over the next month, 17 more facilities went dark. Mining stations, research outposts, slave processing centers, anywhere humans were held captive became a target. The pattern was always the same. Perfect coordination, surgical precision, stolen ships and technology. But the humans weren't just escaping. They were learning. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the captured-conquered vessel Silent Thunder, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. 6 months ago, she had been a prisoner. Now she commanded a fleet of 23 stolen ships, crewed by over 4,000 liberated humans. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Torres, the same officer who had whispered about his kids in that first detention cell. "Long-range scans show conquered fleet positions around Earth. Looks like they've turned our home into a fortress." Sarah nodded grimly. The aliens had learned from the escape incidents. Earth was now surrounded by massive defensive platforms, orbital weapons, and patrol fleets. They weren't taking any chances with their prized possession. "What they don't understand," Sarah said quietly, "is that we're not the same species they captured." It was true. The humans returning to Earth were changed. Months of captivity, neural experimentation, and loss had hardened them. But more than that, they had been educated. Every stolen conquered database had been shared among the human resistance. Earth's children now understood their enemy's technology, psychology, and weaknesses. Dr. Elena Vasquez, rescued from her research facility prison, had become the fleet's strategic advisor. Her analysis of conquered biology had revealed critical vulnerabilities. "The ethereals are essentially living computers," she explained to the gathered ship commanders. "Powerful but rigid. They can't adapt quickly to unexpected situations. The Scaled Dominion are warriors, but they follow predictable tactical doctrine. The Hive Collective act as one mind, which makes them strong but also predictable." "And humans?" Sarah asked. Elena smiled. "Humans are chaos. We're the only species in the galaxy that evolved to expect the unexpected. While they're trying to process our actions through their logical frameworks, we'll already be 3 moves ahead." The attack on Earth began at dawn, Seoul Standard Time. The conquered defenders expected a frontal assault, overwhelming force meeting overwhelming force. Instead, Sarah's fleet split into dozens of small groups, attacking simultaneously from every possible angle. Some ships targeted the defensive platforms, others hit the orbital weapons, still others created diversions that pulled conquered forces out of position. But the real assault came from an unexpected direction. Marcus Rodriguez emerged from the Colorado Mountains with 15,000 human fighters, all equipped with stolen conquered technology. For months they had been preparing, turning Earth's own dangerous environment into a weapon. "They think of Earth as a failed world," Marcus explained to his fighters as they prepared for battle. "Too chaotic, too dangerous, too unpredictable. They don't understand that chaos is our home field advantage." The underground resistance had learned to use Earth's weather patterns, its diverse terrain, its seismic activity. Everything the aliens saw as primitive disadvantages became tactical advantages in human hands. When conquered ground forces landed to suppress the uprising, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know exactly where every earthquake fault line lay, exactly when each storm would hit, exactly how to use Earth's own fury as a weapon. In space, the battle was equally devastating for the conquered. Human ships moved in patterns no alien commander could predict, adapting their tactics moment by moment, turning the enemy's own rigid thinking against them. "Impossible," Captain Zarakith whispered as she watched her fleet being systematically destroyed. "They're coordinating perfectly without central command." "How are they communicating?" The answer would have horrified her. The humans weren't communicating through technology at all. They were reading each other's intentions, anticipating each other's moves, functioning as a pack with an instinctive understanding, born from millions of years of hunting together on the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The Concord had spent so much time trying to break human pack-bonding behaviors that they never understood what those behaviors actually were. They thought human cooperation was weakness. They didn't realize it was humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage. As Earth's defensive grid collapsed and conquered ships fell from the sky, news of the victory spread to human resistance cells across the galaxy. The message was simple: Earth was free, the hunting ground was open, and humanity was no longer prey. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the surface of Earth for the first time in 8 months, breathing free air and feeling soil beneath her feet. Around her, liberated humans were reuniting with their families, searching for lost loved ones, mourning those who couldn't be saved. But they were also preparing. Earth was just the beginning. The conquered had made one final fatal error. They thought conquering humanity would give them slaves. Instead, they had created an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The pack was free. The hunt could begin. 2 years had passed since humanity broke free from their chains. The galaxy burned. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display show the siege of Throne Prime, capital world of the Galactic Concord. Around her, representatives from 67 liberated species worked alongside human officers, planning the final assault on their former masters. Orbital defenses at 30%, reported Commander Torres. The HFY squadrons have broken through the eastern grid. Sarah nodded. The HFY had been slaves for 800 years before humans showed them how to fight back. Now their crystalline ships danced through space like deadly butterflies, their pilots laughing with joy as they struck back at their oppressors. Mordan. Ground forces report successful landing on the southern continent, added Lieutenant Park. They're moving toward the ethereal temples. The Mordan had been broken so thoroughly by conquered pacification that they had forgotten their own names. Humans had helped them remember. Now they fought with the fury of a species reclaiming 3,000 years of stolen history. Every liberation had been the same. Humans would arrive at a slave world, break the guards, and then do something no conqueror in galactic history had ever done. They would help the freed slaves become warriors again. It's not enough to escape, Sarah had told her officers during the early campaigns. We have to teach them to fight. We have to give them back their pride, their strength, their anger, because if we just free them and leave, the conquered will come back. The strategy had worked beyond their wildest dreams. Species that had been pacified for millennia discovered that their lost warrior instincts were still there, buried under centuries of imposed compliance. When humans showed them how to access that buried fire, the results were explosive. But the cost had been terrible. Earth itself bore scars that would never heal. Entire cities had been reduced to ash during the Liberation War. Billions of animals were dead, pets, wildlife, creatures that had taken evolution millions of years to create, wiped out in the Concord's casual genocide. Marcus Rodriguez stood in the ruins of his old neighborhood in Colorado, his daughter Sophia beside him. She was 14 now, and her eyes held a hardness that no child should possess. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you think Whiskers felt afraid when they killed him?" Marcus knelt beside his daughter and pulled her close. Around them, other human families asked the same questions about their lost companions. Dogs, cats, birds, hamsters, every pet that had ever loved a human child murdered for the crime of being inefficient. "I don't know, mija," Marcus said honestly. "But I know this. We're going to make sure it never happens again." The final transmission came as Sarah's fleet entered orbit around Throne Prime. The Ethereals, for the first time in their 3-million-year history, were speaking directly to an enemy. "We offer terms," the crystalline voice echoed across all human vessels. "Cease your aggression and we will negotiate a new arrangement. Your species has proven more capable than our initial assessment indicated." Sarah almost laughed. Even now facing extinction, the Ethereals couldn't admit they had been wrong. They still thought this was about capability, about proving humanity deserved better treatment. They didn't understand that this had stopped being about humanity long ago. "Admiral," the voice continued, "you have achieved what you sought. Your species is free. Your world is restored. There is no need for further violence. We can coexist." "Response, ma'am?" asked Torres. Sarah opened a channel to the entire Concord capital world. When she spoke, her words were broadcast to every crystal spire, every government building, every ethereal consciousness on the planet. "You killed my daughter's goldfish," she said simply. "His name was Nemo. She was 7 years old when you murdered him." Silence filled the communication channel. "You killed Commander Rodriguez's daughter's cat, Whiskers. She loved that cat more than anything in the world, and you vaporized him just to watch her cry." Sarah's voice remained calm. conversational as if discussing the weather. You killed billions of innocent creatures, dogs who had never hurt anyone, cats who existed only to love their families, birds who sang just because they were happy to be alive. You called them inefficient. You called them waste. You called them inferior. The tactical display showed Concord ships beginning to move, trying to form defensive formations. Too little, too late. But most of all, Sarah continued, you killed hope. You took children from their parents. You destroyed families. You broke spirits. You committed genocide not just against humanity, but against love itself. The first human ships opened fire, their weapons charged with 2 years of accumulated fury. You want to know why we won't negotiate? Why we won't coexist? Because you taught us something important about the universe. You taught us that some things are so evil, so fundamentally wrong, that they must be destroyed completely. Throne Prime's shields began to fail under the combined assault of 68 different species, all united in their hatred of their former masters. You called us beasts, Sarah said as orbital platforms exploded in brilliant flashes. You called us primitive. You called us emotional. You were right about one thing, we do feel. We feel every murdered pet, every broken family, every species you crushed under your idea of perfection. The ethereal voice returned, now tinged with something that might have been panic. This is genocide. You are becoming the very monsters you claim to fight. No, Sarah replied quietly. Monsters kill the innocent. We're killing monsters. The ground assault began as the orbital defenses fell. Human marines, supported by warriors from dozens of liberated species, stormed the crystal cities of Throne Prime. But this wasn't random destruction. Every target was carefully chosen: government buildings, military installations, the infrastructure of oppression. The ethereals themselves were given one choice: surrender for trial, or die fighting. Most chose to fight. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the ruins of the Concord's primary research facility, reading through files that documented millions of years of systematic cruelty. Species after species broken and processed and catalogued like specimens in a laboratory. How many? Asked Commander Park, who had joined her in the archive. All of them, Elena said, her voice hollow. Every species in the galaxy except us. They broke them all. The files contained detailed records of every conquest, every pacification, every cultural destruction. The Conquered hadn't just enslaved the galaxy. They had systematically eliminated everything that made each species unique, reducing billions of sentient beings to standardized work units. The Kethvar used to be artists, Elena read from one file. Their entire civilization was based on creating beauty. The Conquered classified art as inefficient resource allocation and genetically modified them to lose aesthetic appreciation. She scrolled through more records, each one a catalog of cultural murder. The Morden were philosophers. They had developed ethical frameworks that made war nearly impossible among their people. The Conquered called philosophy mental instability and chemically suppressed their capacity for abstract thought. Commander Park was quiet for a long moment. No wonder they fought so hard once we freed them. They weren't just getting their freedom back. They were getting their souls back. The final battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Galactic Concord, a civilization that had dominated the galaxy for 3 million years, simply ceased to exist. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the central chamber of the ethereal high command, now a tomb filled with shattered crystal corpses. Around her, the representatives of the liberated galaxy waited for her words. It's over, she said simply, but as she looked at the faces around her, humans, Kethvar, Morden, and dozens of other species, Sarah knew it wasn't really over. It was just beginning. We have a choice now, she continued. We can build something better than the Conquered. We can create a galaxy where strength protects the weak instead of consuming them, where diversity is celebrated instead of eliminated, where love is a virtue instead of a weakness. Marcus Rodriguez stepped forward, his daughter Sophia at his side. And if anyone tries to stop us, if anyone tries to bring back the old ways? Sarah looked at Sophia, thinking of a little girl who had once loved a cat named Whiskers, thinking of all the children across the galaxy who had lost everything to the Conquered's idea of efficiency. Then they'll learn what happened to the last beings who thought love was weakness, she said. The representatives nodded. The lesson had been written in crystalline fire across the galaxy. Those who prey on the innocent will face the wrath of Earth's children. The beasts had answered. The galaxy would never forget their song. Years later, children across 100 worlds would learn the story. They would hear about the species that fought back, that refused to be broken, that turned their love into the most powerful weapon the universe had ever seen. They would learn that monsters could be defeated, and they would never have to beg for mercy again.